He owned the restaurant. He paid everyone's salary, and not a single person recognized him. That one night, sitting quietly at a corner table, watching his own staff work, he saw something that stopped him cold. A young waitress, balancing plates and forcing smiles, slipped behind the kitchen door and broke down in tears. And what he did next, nobody saw it coming. This is the story of Daniel Mercer, a man who built a restaurant empire from scratch, and one night decided to walk into his own world as a stranger. No title, no suit, no introduction. Just a regular guy looking for a quiet dinner. What he found instead changed everything. For him, for his staff, and especially for one woman who had no idea her life was about to flip upside down. Stay with me because this story goes places you won't expect. Daniel Mercer was not the kind of CEO you see on magazine covers. No flashy car, no personal assistant trailing behind him with a clipboard. He was the type of man who started out washing dishes at 17, worked his way up through every single station in a kitchen, and eventually opened his first restaurant at 29, with money he saved over 12 years. By the time he was 45, he owned 14 restaurants across 5 cities. But success has a way of pulling you away from the ground, meetings, investors, numbers, reports. Daniel had spent the last 3 years behind a desk, reading about his restaurants, instead of actually being in them. And something started feeling wrong. The reviews were slipping, staff turnover was climbing, customers were complaining about the cold atmosphere, and he couldn't figure out why from a spreadsheet. So one Thursday evening, he made a decision. No phone calls ahead, no warning to the manager. He put on a simple gray jacket, drove 40 minutes to his flagship restaurant, the one he opened first, the one closest to his heart, and walked in like any other customer. The hostess smiled at him, handed him a menu, sat him at a table by the window. She had no idea she just seated the man who signs her paycheck. For the first hour, everything looked fine on the surface. The food came out on time. The place was clean. But Daniel was watching. Really watching. The kind of watching you only do when nobody knows you're looking. And what he saw behind the polished surface was a completely different story. The floor manager, a man named Greg, was running the staff like a military operation, snapping orders, rolling his eyes when someone moved too slow. At one point, Daniel watched Greg pull a young server aside and speak to her in a low, sharp voice that made her shoulders drop like someone had pressed them down. She nodded, looked at the floor, and walked back out to her tables with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name tag said Sarah. Daniel kept watching her. She was good at her job. Fast, attentive, remembered orders without writing them down. But there was something heavy about the way she moved, like she was carrying something nobody else could see. About 90 minutes into his dinner, Sarah disappeared through the kitchen door. Normal enough. Servers go in and out all the time. But she didn't come back out. A minute passed. Then 2, then 5. Daniel noticed. Nobody else did. When she finally came back out, her eyes were red. She had clearly been crying. She straightened her apron, took a breath, and walked straight to a table of 4 with a warm smile like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just been falling apart 30 seconds ago. Daniel sat back in his chair and felt something shift in his chest. After he paid his bill, he didn't leave. He asked the hostess if he could speak to the manager. Greg came out with that professional smile, the one people put on when they think someone is about to complain about the food. Daniel introduced himself. The color drained from Greg's face so fast it was almost cartoonish. But Daniel didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene. He simply said, "I've been sitting here for 2 hours. I need you to tell me what happened with the young woman who was crying in the kitchen tonight." Greg stumbled through an explanation. Said Sarah had been struggling with performance. Said he had given her multiple warnings. Said she was too emotional for the job. Daniel listened to every word. Then he asked one more question. "Have you ever asked her what's going on in her life?" Silence. The answer obviously was no. The next morning, Daniel came back to the restaurant. This time, not as a customer. He called a team meeting and sat down with the entire staff. And for the first time in years, he told them his story. Washing dishes at 17, sleeping in his car for 6 weeks when money ran out. The years of grinding before anyone believed in him. Then he asked everyone in that room to share one thing they were struggling with. Not at work, in life. What happened next surprised even him. The stories that came out of that room were heavy, real. Sarah, the crying waitress who talked about raising her younger brother alone after losing both parents, working doubles every weekend to cover rent and his school fees. She wasn't struggling with performance. She was exhausted in a way that most people have never had to feel. 2 other servers were dealing with similar pressures nobody had ever bothered to ask about. And Greg, the sharp-edged manager, who had been running the place like a factory, admitted quietly that he had been managing out of fear for years because that's how he had been managed. He didn't know another way. That morning changed the culture of that restaurant overnight. Not because Daniel gave a big speech, but because he actually showed up, actually listened, actually saw the people who had been invisible inside his own walls. Within 3 months, staff turnover at that location dropped by over 60%. Customer satisfaction scores climbed back up. The cold atmosphere reviews stopped, and Daniel rolled out what he called his open table policy, 1 hour every week, where any employee at any level could sit down with management and talk. No agenda, no performance reviews, just conversation. He also promoted Sarah, not out of pity, out of recognition. He saw what she was doing every single day and realized she had been leading without a title for a long time. She became the assistant floor manager within 6 months. Today, she manages that restaurant, the same one where she was crying behind a kitchen door, invisible to everyone around her. There is a study by Gallup, one of the biggest research organizations in the world, that found 70% of employee engagement is directly influenced by the manager. 70%. That means the way a leader behaves in a room has more impact on a team's performance than almost anything else. Daniel didn't need that study to tell him what he saw with his own eyes. But it confirms what most of us already know deep down. People don't leave bad jobs. They leave bad environments. And the most dangerous thing a leader can do is stop, actually seeing the people around them. Daniel still does undercover visits to his restaurants, not to catch people doing something wrong, but to remember what it actually feels like to be inside the thing he built. As a human, not a headline. He says the corner table by the window is always his favorite seat. Good view of the whole room, and a very clear line of sight to the kitchen door. Because now he knows the most important things happening in any room are often the things nobody is looking at. If this story hit different for you, watch the next video on screen right now. You won't want to miss it.